Brief. We will provide a full update on the overall picture when I'm back in Wellington later on this afternoon. But I do want to acknowledge the local community here, what we've seen in the local community today. Clearly, this is a significant event, very traumatic for those who have been affected by it. The damage is extensive, and we've just been working to understand the impacts of that on the ground. There's no doubt that this sort of thing places communities under enormous pressure. But what we've also seen in the last 24 to 48 hours is the very best of New Zealand as well. We've seen those communities coming together, wrapping support around each other, looking after each other. I want to acknowledge that one of the real pressure points at the moment is that people are just finding it really difficult to communicate with each other. And so I absolutely acknowledge that the pressure that puts on people, not knowing that pressure of uncertainty is something that's very, very real for families. So we're working quickly as fast as we can to try and get connectivity restored, and including trying to put some temporary measures in place, like hotspots, so that people are able to keep in touch. Water is clearly going to be an issue in this area. We've had some conversations about that. We've got some temporary water supplies en route. Making sure that we're getting convoys of trucks in order to, we have got land connectivity restored in part, so there is a convoy of trucks coming in and out each day, but we're trying to keep the usage of the roads relatively limited so that we can get the road reopened as quickly as possible. But there are convoys of trucks coming in. We actually saw one of the convoys arriving just as we arrived today, so that was, I think there's about 20 trucks there, very full. And so there are supplies now coming back into the region, and we'll be endeavouring to keep that going in the next few days. As I've said, we'll provide a full update with everything when we're back in Wellington. But
one of the things that's really frustrating people out there on the ground here is the lack of communication, not being able to connect with their whānau. Can you give any sort of timeline for Gisborne in particular and this region when they'll be able to get back online?
It could be some time before we get broadband restored. What we're focused on at the moment is getting Starlink, as much connectivity through Starlink in as we can. So it's likely to be limited. It might be phone and text message, for example, in some areas, and trying to create some hotspots where we can so that people can access the internet.
Is there Starlink at the hospital? Because that was one of the concerns that we heard, that there's no comms at the hospital.
I'm not sure, but
my understanding is that there is some connectivity there.
Prime Minister, so it's just a major infrastructure issue here, isn't it? And we can come in and we can patchwork, piecemeal repair, but in fact this just keeps happening. It happened in Hale, it's happening now, it happened last year, it happened in 2018, it happened in 2017. This government has to spend serious money on making infrastructure resilient, doesn't it?
Oh, there's no question that as a country we need to look at the resilience of our infrastructure, and we need to do that with a much greater sense of urgency, I think, than we have ever seen before. This weather event has really highlighted that for me. It is going to be expensive. It's going to require some really big calls by government to actually get the things happening that need to happen. We're talking about roading, we're talking about telecommunications, we're talking about electricity and energy. There's no question. We've got some big challenges ahead.
Are you prepared to accept those challenges?
Absolutely.
Have you got the money to spend the money?
We will simply have to find a way of doing it. There's just no question that we can't continue the way that we have been going. We are going to see more of these types of weather events. And so we have to be prepared. And it might not be here, it might be in other parts of the country. So we're going to have to look at very closely at how we make sure we've got as resilient an infrastructure as possible.
Can you tell us about the request that we made to Australia?
My understanding, and I'll provide fuller information about the international assistance, we are accepting offers of international assistance, and we'll be able to detail more of that later on this afternoon.
Prime Minister, a lot of the residents out in Takaraka felt abandoned during this storm. What's your message to them?
Look, I want to absolutely acknowledge it can be really lonely and isolating when you're cut off in the way that they were over the last 48 hours. We worked really hard to try and get that, to reconnect, but with the extreme weather, of course, they couldn't get out, we couldn't get people in. I think we've now managed to create a lot more connection than we had 24 hours ago. But I acknowledge that if you're on the ground and you're in those circumstances, you're confronted with uncertainty, you're confronted with pretty extreme conditions. Some of the initial evacuation points then had to be evacuated themselves. And so all of that adds up, and it places a huge stress on people. And again, I just want to reflect again on what I saw this morning, which was those communities really banding together and looking after each other. That really is the Kiwi way of doing things, and I really acknowledge though that that's tough, and that some of those people are going to need a break. So we're going to be looking in the next little while about how we can make sure that those people who have just been giving it their all actually get a little bit of a break themselves.
What assurances?
Why
haven't
you
you been up?
confirmed
Have
this
you been up
morning
close?
one person had died in Gisborne. Do you have any more details about that? And yes, I understand someone else has died up in Muddy Bay.
Yeah, no, I don't have any more details on that, but we should be in a position to provide a fuller update when we do the briefing back in Wellington later on.
You're standing beside the local MP.
Yes.
And
Well, would you like her to say something? See, come on, Kitty. There you go.
maybe you can both address
Yeah.
this. This is a big infrastructure spend. You've committed to doing it. But yesterday, Kitty Tapualan said it could be months, if not years, for example, until State Highway 35 is sufficiently resilient to survive a big storm. What do people do in the meantime?
That's a very big challenge, John. And look, we can work and we will work to try and restore infrastructure as fast as we can. But also, we have to acknowledge we're in for a bit of a bumpy ride here, and the stress and the strain that the infrastructure outages that we're seeing at the moment could go on for some time. And we're going to have to support communities through that. So right now we've got the Defence Force helping to plug some of those gaps. You know, we've got naval vessels bringing in supplies. We've got, the Air Force bringing in supplies. And like I said, we've got those convoys coming in on roads that are otherwise closed. We will do everything that we can to support the community through, but I do want to acknowledge, there's no instant overnight fix here. When you look at the pictures of some of the roads that have been washed out, for example, we could have the bulldozers working 24/7, and it's still going to take quite some time to get those road links re-established.
Do we need to rethink some of those road links? Are they in the right places? Is it time to rethink our roading network?
Almost certainly. We've already had that conversation around the Coromandel and some of the disruption that we've seen there with roads that were literally only just reopened, then being washed out again. That's not a sustainable picture. We've experienced this in other parts of the country too. I think about the Manawatu Gorge, for example. We actually just have to get real about some of the roads and the fact that we're going to have to move some of those roads to places where they can be more resilient.
Prime Minister, have you decided on supporting the call for an independent inquiry?
If you're talking about in terms of the slash.
Our tied RNZ petition that was
Yeah, the
presented to
slash.
council over Hale. Have you got an opinion on that? Will an inquiry be happening, or will it stay as a review?
That will ultimately go to the Cabinet, but I do want to just provide a reassurance that absolutely have heard the concerns. It's a real concern, it's a valid concern. It is time for us to do something more serious about that, and we absolutely will.
Have you gone up the East Coast yet? Bridget Parker was on Radio New Zealand on Monday, I think it was, saying that no politician of any colour has shown up there.
Yeah,
Have
no,
you shown up there?
I haven't been up there, unfortunately, because I've got to get back to Wellington this afternoon, but I'm sure the local MP will be making her way up there in due course.
One of the challenges, of course, has been that it's about prioritising who can get in and out, particularly up the coast. Look, we've done over-air look downs at the infrastructure challenges in particular, and as things become safer to move about and the needs are prioritised, then folks like ourselves can get up on the ground. But I think just to round out that comment is that our coasties up there, they're at the forefront of our mind, and I just want to acknowledge the work of the civil defence leads up and down the coast who have been feeding back into us to give us an appraisal of what those imminent needs are, and just really grateful.
Prime Minister, in the context of Three Waters, is there a lesson here about the ability of regional government, the GDC in this case, to afford the kind of spending that's required? 50,000 people in this region, not all of whom are ratepayers, some are children obviously, and they don't have any money.
Yeah.
And so how the hell do we get this right, the balancing act right? These guys can't keep tidying up after cyclones, can they?
Look, I don't want to kind of get into the politics of Three Waters today, because clearly when people are conserving water and being told not to use water because we're trying to ship it in, clearly I think the most immediate focus is on getting the water restored.
I guess it's a question about central government, local government split, isn't it? And local government can't carry the burden of this stuff.
But in any natural disaster like this, you wouldn't expect local government to carry the can on their own. Central government must play a role. We've done that after other significant events across the country. I think about the Christchurch earthquakes. I think about events on the West Coast. Central government is undoubtedly going to have to play a significant role in rebuilding.
Prime Minister, what assurances can you... What assurances can you provide to some of those vulnerable, isolated communities should they be hit with another weather event in the near future?
I guess the reality is, the weather remains unpredictable. It's started to rain out there again now. We're continuing to do everything we can to reach those communities, to make sure that the supply chains and the communication channels are open. I can tell you that across central government and local governments too, this is the number one focus at the moment. We've got to put everything that we can into getting people through this.
Would you look at any regulation to force telcos to build more resilience into their cell phone network after this utter disaster?
Look, I don't want to rule things in or out at this point, but clearly, as I've said, the resilience of our infrastructure, whether it's telecommunications, electricity, roading, supply chain, all of that, we'll be having a very good look at that.
Telecommunications has a social, the other two things you've mentioned are managed by the state. Telecommunications companies, do they have a social responsibility to make sure that people can get in contact with their loved ones during a natural disaster?
Look, I think we need to make sure we've got basic levels of connectivity as quickly as we can after a natural disaster. No one can guarantee, full connectivity 24/7 when you're confronted with this types of weather event that we have just seen. I think what people would expect, though, is that we've got, good backup in place that we can get up and running as quickly as possible.
Where were you when the earthquake struck last night, and what were you thinking?
I was actually at an event at the stadium in Wellington, and I'm not going to repeat my initial words when the earthquake happened.
Did it feel apocalyptic?
I was very relieved to find that the Beehive bunker was still fully functional.
Prime Minister, back to communication. So Starlink here in Gisborne, some organisations are having to stop using their Starlink and give it to other organisations. Are you in contact with Starlink about how many satellites are actually here in New Zealand that people can access to use?
We'll be able to provide a fuller update on that this afternoon,
Yep.
but we've clearly got to get the connectivity to the communities that need it most.
So you're not tweeting at Elon Musk?
What's that?
So you're not tweeting at Elon
No,
Musk?
no. In fact, I haven't really been using any connectivity while I've been here, which is one of the reasons I need to wait until I get back to Wellington to answer a whole lot of your questions. So,
Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Those people who have spent the night in their cars, is that acceptable to you, and how do you feel hearing those stories?
look, my heart goes out to those families, those people who have been in an extraordinary, difficult set of circumstances. I can only imagine how I would feel if I was in that set of circumstances with my own family. It has been an extraordinary weather event. We will absolutely be focused on doing everything we can to support them from this point onwards to get through.
Prime Minister,
Sorry,
what
we
have
need
been the
to
biggest
go on.
lessons that you've learned during this, and what, if any, do you see as holes in the response?
Look, I just want to, there'll be plenty of time to reflect and to look at the lessons to be learned, but the key thing I want to reflect on at the moment is just how much New Zealanders are doing to support each other through what is undoubtedly some of the biggest challenges some of them will have ever faced in their lives.
Gisborne is a food bowl, looking at some of those orchards, vineyards.
Yeah.
What's it going to do to the price of food?
There'll be plenty of time to look at that.